So I think we start. So my name is Vicky and this is Sole. We are the animal and the plant expert within the ECOLOPES. And we're going to give you a talk today about the way that we have connected plants and animals to create an ecological interaction network to bridge ecological modeling and ecosystem services. I'm sorry, I have to turn this way because I can't see. Okay, and hopefully within this presentation, some of the questions that, for example, Yasha has brought up and was in his presentation, or Asaf has brought up in terms of we having to pay people to have animals in the building, will be answered.
Yeah, okay, should I start?
I would like to.
Hi everyone, how can I change this slide? Oh, yes. Is that working? Okay, yeah, here we are. So not very needed about the context because we are here. It's been a long conference already, and we already know that urban green spaces are hugely important for us, but also for other stakeholders, for the ecosystems. But the matter of fact is that cities are planned for humans, and so are most nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions, we already know what they are. There are plenty different types that do different things. And they're very much needed to address the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis within urban spaces especially. But they are inherently multi-species systems. And so what is missing for now is a multi-species approach or the ecosystem approach. So what are we trying to provide here? What do we want to talk about here is the kind of a new way of thinking about planning nature-based solutions that involves the inference of the multi-species trophic network. And this is useful to guide urban planning, managing restoration efforts, and for all the things that we want to do with ECOLOPES. Next. So how does it work? Our framework is a framework, so it's based on tools, processes, and outputs. And the starting point is the local ecosystem. What is the local ecosystem? Is the number, quality, entity of species and their interactions. So how do we know about these interactions and these species? Well, first of all, we have to retrieve the species in a given site. Let's say you want to design a given ecolope in a location. So the first step would be to retrieve the species around that location, so we know what is already there, because we don't want to plant like the trivial species that everyone plants. We want to plant the right species that are able to thrive in the ecosystems and are able to support the local ecosystem. So the first step is to leverage widely available open source data about biodiversity, which is GBIF. I don't know if you heard about it, but you definitely should, and check it out because it's very cool. And so we get all the birds, mammals, and plant species in a radius around the location that we want to model. Then there's a lot of data cleaning involved with the very inspiring superhero scientist icon that Vicky put there. Then there's the check for taxonomy, because taxonomies are very important also in plant science and animal science. And then, with the species pool that we have, the local species pool, we assign the plants to the plant functional groups that we built. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. It's a buzzword, by the way, within ECOLOPES, the functional groups approach, and I'm going to get to that. Or they're clustered into animal functional groups, which Vicky will explain in a moment. And then, to make it even more exciting, we do an ecological network between animals and plants based on literature-supported data about biotic interactions that we retrieve from Globi database, which is also pretty cool if you want to check it out. Next. So, functional groups. I don't know if you know it, but plants-wise, there are hundreds of thousands of species. Try to model that and come back to me in 25 years and tell me how it goes. So we need groups to model the performance of these species in space and time. So functional groups are kind of a good compromise between detail and computational power that we came out with, not me, but the people before me. And they are based on grouping similar species that are supposed to function similarly in the ecological space. And how do we group these species? So for example, you can think the most trivial functional group is trees, shrubs, herbs, in terms of plants, of course. But these are not enough to be modeled because they will perform similarly whether it's a pine tree or a magnolia tree, and they are completely different ecosystem-wise. So, species are grouped according to functional traits that are informative about their functioning in the ecosystems, their relationship to others, stakeholders, substrate, habitat, and so on. And they ensure an adequate level of detail. But what happens? So far, functional groups lacked information about, for example, how they can enhance thermal comfort for human or CO2 capture, explicit information I'm talking about. Now, of course, we can speculate, but explicit informations. And they lack the information about the connection with other stakeholders, for example, animals. Yes? So, diagram. How do we create plant functional groups? If you're interested in the details, a nice paper from our group just came out in September, summarizing all the process, but mainly, so we gather traits for plant species based on the key ecological dimensions, which are life form, competition, disturbance, habitat, dispersal, and demography. And this is the article you have on the right. Then, now, since this process was the result of a lot of discussions with designers, we came up with what designers need in order to plan better need-to-based solutions. And these are information related to, for example, ecosystem services, and which one are the most important? CO2 stockage, air pollution removal, or thermal comfort, for example. So we added additionally ecosystem services modules to these plant functional groups. And lastly, of course, it's not all about functioning, also the eye wants is reward, so we have filters, for example, linked to aesthetic. Flower color, leaf coverage, the type of fruit, which can be pretty important if you're planning a ginkgo biloba path, for example, or, for example, related to the invasive potential of the species, which is also very important because we don't want to introduce an invasive species in ecosystems, and also related to biotic interactions. So next. How do we make this accessible to users, or ecologists, or anyone that wants to access it? We designed a nice R-based shiny app that allows you to screen among the plant functional groups characteristics, whether it's the species that are contained inside the plant functional groups, their functional traits, or for example, as in this case, which is not very visible, but trust me, it's about in which country are the species invasive, which is a pretty cool information. Next.
Okay, and so then we want to create the animal functional groups. So the animal functional groups themselves are a lot more simple than the plant functional groups, but still very effective. They are based on 3 different traits. The body mass, where the animals are actually broken down into different categories of size, depending on taxonomic class. So for example, you have the tiny little things in the mammals, which are the small rodents, all the way up to the big herbivores, mammals such as the deer. And you also have similarly for birds as well as, and they also broken down into herbivores and carnivores. We also find out what it is their animal diet and their plant diet, and this also comes from the GLOBI database. Now what's really interesting about this is as in previous animal functional groups, when we considered only diet of animals, we only decided if they were a herbivore or a carnivore, an insectivore, something that eats insects. But we decided to explicitly describe the plant and the animal functional group in plant and animal diets so that we could then form an interaction network. And it looks like something like this. Now what you have is on the left-hand side, the plant functional group community, which is the plant functional groups that SOLA provides, and you have the animal functional group community, which is provided by myself. And what you'll see is all the different lines are connecting them to each other, which are the description of the interactions of the diets, the plant diet as well as the animal diet. Now, why is this ecosystem interaction network cool and useful for the designers and nature-based solutions? Well, with the plant functional groups, we've already know that there are plant functional group traits for ecosystem services such as thermal comfort and CO2 removal. Now, why are the animals useful and why we don't need to be paid to have them on our buildings? Because a rich and diverse animal community will actually help create a stable and diverse plant community that provides you those ecosystem services. Now, what can the animals do for the plants? Well, they will do things like grazing. So fast-growing plants that would outcompete others and reduce the diversity of the plant community will be maintained and grazed by those animals. There will be seed dispersal, so that once, for example, perennial plants, the ones that die regularly, will then be have their seeds redispersed so that they can recolonize the building, in this case. And there will also be nutrient cycle. So animals, for example, who are burrowers, they will themselves burrow into the ground, help with soil mixture, and also defecate. So let's put this interaction network that we've created with our animal and plant functional groups into a beautiful case study. So we had a look at the wild climatic wall, which was actually introduced in one of the ECOLOPE talks by Leonie Fischer's group. And this is a wall that was created in Stuttgart University, and one of their buildings that is not in Stuttgart. It's like a small urban island outside of Stuttgart, and it's not too far away from farmland and some forestry. And what this group did was they asked help from a company called Helix, who makes plant tiles that are then used to create facades. And they used their biological knowledge to choose specific plants that they wanted to plant onto this facade. And now these plants, they were to create certain services. For example, increasing the habitat for bats, increasing the habitat so they could have higher bird diversity. Thermal comfort, where some of their experiments have shown to reduce the inside temperature on a very hot sunny day by 10 degrees. Now, like Yasha asked, is it possible to create a plan so that we know exactly where to put those plants? Yes, they create a plant plan where you can know exactly where to put which tile where on the building and what that tile should contain in terms of plants. And there you have them building it along the side. Now, we wanted to say, okay, so they created this this wonderful wall with specific services that they wanted to provide in mind. But what other services have they accidentally created? So we decided to show off our framework, our interaction network, matching it to all of the species that they themselves planted on that wall, but also other plants that could be spontaneously colonizing this wall from the region, as well as looking at all of the different animals that can come into the area and interact with the wall, either by living on the wall or just using it as part of their daily life. We also wanted to look and see what kind of information we can glean from this interaction network that we will gain, and then use this understanding of the interaction network to give suggestions on how you could improve the natural-based solution design for other stakeholders. Okay, so case study. What is our emerging ecosystem? So, Leonie Fischer's group on the wild wall, they decided to plant 41 specific plant species, and they also allowed some bare areas so that there could be spontaneously colonizing plants. From GBIF, we managed to take and retrieve over 2,000 spontaneously colonizing plants that did not include things like trees or aquatic. we came up with that problem. We also had a look at the GBIF for the different animal species, and I sat down with some members of my team with a cup of coffee, and we negotiated what kind of animals we really would say would be able to colonize this or use this wall from the species list that we gained from GBIF. And as you can see, we have quite a wide variety of plants. We have the grasses, we have the herbs, we have the colors, and we also have from the animals, we have the small birds, the cute little mammals, the fluffy killers, everything is there. So, results. So what you see are two different interaction networks that we managed to create. The one on the left-hand side is the planted plants that Leonie Fischer has planted herself onto the building, and on the right-hand side is the planted plants as well as some regional plants that could spontaneously colonize. Now just remember that the spontaneously colonizing plants, they will not be as high a density as the specific planted plants, but they still, regardless, are important. What can we learn? So from the animal point of view, quite a lot. So red is what we learn directly from the network, just by looking at it, and blue is what we look at in terms of the services that the animals can give to the plant community. So, for example, in red, we have some herbivores who themselves are very specialized eaters. They don't eat very many plants, but they also are eaten by a wide variety of predators. They support them. And so these prey are pretty vulnerable, and we must make sure that they have plants that they are stable and plentiful so that they can support higher up trophic levels. We have apex predators that are pretty awesome because they themselves are generalists, so we don't have to worry about them. They are flexible. And we also have some plants which are just not eaten and supporting by the animal community. Blue, the interesting part for what we want to encourage people to have animals on the building. So for example, we have some herbivores themselves that are very good at keeping fast-growing plants from colonizing and taking over the entire wall. We also have other species who are really good at spreading their seeds. As well as looking at the food web itself, the interaction network itself, we also wanted to employ a very beautiful tool that I created during my time in the ECOLOPES project. And this is, it's multi-home. It's a multi-species, multi-trophic animal model, which was one of the results that you can get from this model, is the distribution of biomass of animals by animal functional group in the area that you run it on. Now, what we did was we inferred a plant biomass map to input into this model using the trait-based knowledge that we had, and then I just show you a selection of the different types of maps. The key to know is darker means higher biomass and white means no one's really there. So, information we can glean, for example, is, the one at the bottom. He is hardly present because his food is simply just scattered around too much by the architects planning their wall. And we can say that this is a problem because he is very important for spreading seeds, and so if he is not present on the wall, then that service to that plant community is missing. So we would have to suggest to please cluster the food resource.
Yeah, so from the ecosystem services standpoint, another thing that we can output with this framework is a way to optimize our facade, our nature-based solution in regard to the different ecosystem services that we want to target. And here in the small pictures, there are of course plants that are already planted onto the facade. And the first one is the nice Echinacea purpurea, lovely flower. And here in the small table around it, next to it, you can see by color the different ecosystem services and the traits that are related to them that are proper to the species. And so, for example, the first one is air pollution, and this species has a crenate margin, toothed margin, which are shown in literature to be more prone to absorb, for example, environmental pollution. And so, having a species with a not toothed margin will potentially decrease their ability to harvest air pollution. And so this one is good in this way. There are interactions, it has nectar, or it provides low-medium shading, but it's an herbaceous species. After all, they cannot do much about it. But, for example, it's not invasive anywhere, so you can plant it with a lot of confidence. And most of all, it's related, for example, to this specific animal functional group, that is I believe it's called the greater tit. And this one, the greater tit, is eaten by the other bird. So we kind of have the picture of the network. But what happens, for example, if a designer or us wants to change one of these ecosystem services, wants to tweak the ecosystem services that the facade can provide. And for example, here we have the Medicago sativa down below, and the designer wants to change the flower color. There's too much violet on the facade. Enough with the violet. I want a yellow flowering species. And so, just to ensure the same biotic interactions, because it belongs to the same functional groups, the designer can switch it for Tussilago farfara, which is a very nice yellowy flowering species that will provide pretty much the same interactions. But it has, for example, crenate margin that will supposedly harvest more air pollution. So this is a very trivial example of how can a designer tweak the species composition on the facade. Oh, I I didn't prepare this one.
Okay, I go. Okay, so we have some nice take-home messages. So within our project, our little collaboration that we did together, we have come up with a beautiful framework in order to be able to convert plant species into plant functional groups, and with these plant functional groups giving information on the different types of ecosystem services that they can provide for nature-based solutions. We also created an animal community with that you're able to gain information on how it is connected to the plant community and how it can then support that plant community so that it can do better in its ecosystem services, which are good for your nature-based solutions. And this is our ecosystem interaction network. And the cool thing about this ecosystem interaction network is it really brings to a whole new level we go to an ecologist and we ask for their best educated guess, and then we give it a go, and then we get our master's student to do a little experiment at the end and see how good a job we did. Here with this ecosystem interaction network, we have more information on how all of the different animals and plants within the community interact with each other in order to perform, hopefully, to the best that they can.
Yeah, and we would like to acknowledge the ecosystem interaction network below, which is the co-authors and people that were involved in designing this framework. So thank you.
So thank you, Sola and Vicky. We are really running out of time, but is there an urgent question? A really urgent question?
Thank you for the inspiring presentation, really amazing, very nice work. The question is it all or nothing solution? Meaning that either I put all this network together to work, or as a designer I can come to you and tell you, listen, I have 3 square meters ecolope. Would you be able to create something that works for me?
I mean, that's what we showed in the case study with the planted species. So what was done with Leonie Fischer was that she said, I want to be able to increase the diversity of birds. And I want to increase the diversity of bat species because they themselves are quite rare. And, I can actually click one more. And I want to do, we're ready for you, Yasha. I know you. And I want to be able to do something with thermal comfort. Now, she also creates building blocks like in ECOLOPES, where she, a sister project, they actually make small facades, and so that they experiment to see what type of plants they can use in order to be able to, say, reduce the temperature by about 10 degrees there. Or if they want to go more for the aesthetics, because they want people to embrace ecosystems and change, and for them beauty is more important, they've also done experiments on how to see how the facade will change across the growing period of the year and make sure that it is always beautiful for people, the residents. Once you have decided the kind of ecosystem services that you are interested in, then we can show the kind of plant functional groups that are present within the regional area, as well as some that you can bring in. But I would say regional is best because that works better with the interaction of the local animal pool. And then with that we can build the interaction network. It can be almost like a designer interaction network.
Yeah, if I may jump in, you can assign the species that you have planted, whether they're 3 or 10 or 10,000, to functional groups of plants, and then on top of that you have the ecological interaction network. So it can be either very localized or regional, or...
And it can be very tailor specific, should you wish to be very tailor specific.
Great. So they solved your urgent.
Thank you, this is great. Sola, you insisted on the invasiveness, and that's my question here. So it's very static now, you should combine it now with the plant model, because as you said, wiki spontaneous vegetation will...
yes, but I'm not allowed to use the plant.
Yeah, it will come. And, invasive species are better adapted to conditions, so it's still possible that you will have an invasion on this kind of ecosystem. And so, what you said now, so it will change, and maybe it will have effects that are not that what the designer wanted in the first place? Or what do you think about that?
So I would say that I would think of the ecosystem interaction network as a potential of what it is that you can have on the building. Now, I don't know how to go backwards with the click, but I showed you with the just running of multi-home that it showed that the plan of the potential interaction network that you wanted on the building was not going to work for one particular functional group because of the way that it was dispersed, planted in a very spread out way. With the plant model, or Ph.D, whatever you want to use, then you would be able to then have a look at the spatial interactions. The ecosystem interaction network doesn't look in a spatial way, it just looks at the potential of what you could have, and then you, the designer, will have to decide how to plant those plants in a particular format, or how you design that building so that the animals can get to the greenery. There's someone behind you who needs to ask.
May I finish the answer to Thomas as well? I just want to make a point. What it does, this tool, is allow the designer to screen within the same plant functional groups, which will function exactly the same in the plant model of the ECOLOPES. Screen the species that are invasive and where. And so just like a safe warranty not to plant this particular species when you're actually doing the nature-based solutions.
Yeah, I understand it, but you said before that you also calculated what spontaneous vegetation will add or will come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but spontaneous vegetation is intended in the broader sense of the term, that is all the species that are present in the area, which also includes invasive species.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I just have a question that is linked to that. So do you imagine to have like an open source, a kind of feedback function to that network where people who try?
Everything is open source.
Yeah, I mean a direct reporting of people who experience, for example, or especially invading species in their plant network, so that you can kind of change what you have.
Come again, sorry, it was really difficult to understand.
We can't hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So does it work now? Much better. I'm so sorry. Okay. Do you plan like to actively collect feedback about invasive species in order to improve that, what you offer with time?
There are like country and continent-wide lists of invasive species, so the kind of the normative is already there, and we know which species is invasive where. There's a huge, it's called GREES database online that you can screen for countries and species.
Okay.
But feedbacks are of course very useful.
Yeah, I just wondered if there's maybe like you plan like especially collecting information about experiences made. Yeah.
That would be great. We are
okay, but you have to.
We're not going anywhere. So thank you very much.